We always want to tape down our paper to our board, and the reason for that is once the paper gets wet, it starts to curl or warp, and we don't want that to happen. So we want to try to make sure that we have it all secured down so that doesn't happen. Let's get rid of any dust or debris on your page as well. So what we're going to do today is we're going to use a wet into wet process. We're going to cover the entire page with water, let the water sink in a little bit, then we'll mix our paint. And so I'm going to take my 3/4 inch flat brush and I'm going to do the wet into wet. I'm going to stroke my brush over the paper, making sure that I get all of it. And sometimes what you need to do is tilt your head to the side and look at the sheen of the paper to make sure that you're actually covering it all. Because if you don't, you'll get a watermark. And what you want to do also is you want to make sure your brush is completely taking a pass across the page so we get off any excess water that we don't want. We don't want pooling. That'll actually cause a blooming effect. So again, I'm just taking clean water. I'm going right across the entire page, and I'm just kind of tilting my head a little so I can see the reflection of that water and making sure that I got it all. Anytime you see little bits of hair and debris in there, just try to get them out. All right, so now I'm going to take, with a real sunny sky like this, we're going to use a color called Phthalo Blue. Phthalo Blue is your typical sunny day blue sky color. Now, right out of the tube, it's just a little bit too intense and too dark in value for what we want. So we're going to add a good mixture of water to it. We want to try to get enough of this to get that first pass covered without having to stop and remix. So what I'm doing is I'm taking some Phthalo Blue and I'm adding some white to it. I'm going to make sure I have enough. Again, I'm going to keep throwing water in here. And I also, if you notice, I have a test strip of paper right here. It's always smart to have a piece of test paper so you can just try your colors out on your test paper before you even start. That's looking pretty good. I think I might throw a little bit more water into it. Just a little bit more. Remember, I want my paint to be really fluid. All right. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to loosely interpret these clouds. I'm not going to make them perfectly exact. I'm going to somewhere in the realm. So what I'm going to start by doing is kind of deciding where that cloud is going to live. So I'm going to start by just kind of drawing in the edge of my clouds. And then I'm going to go ahead and it's going to kind of fill the rest in. Now you can see because the paper is already moist, it really takes the paint nice. So anytime we want like that really nice blend, we're going to use wet into wet. And the reason I'm using it here because I want the edges of these clouds to be nice and soft. That being said, I'm also going to make sure that I leave some really nice crisp areas on the edges of the clouds as well. It's nice when you're doing these type of clouds, these big it's nice to have both soft edges and hard edges, all right? If you have them all consistent, it gets a little boring looking. So, all right, so that's a nice start. So I have my basic shape laid in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to play with the edges now. And there's a couple things we can do. Like right off the bat, if I want to, I could take a moist brush. Like there's going to be spots where I want this to be soft, and there's going to be spots where I want this to be hard. I'm going to choose this area over here to be soft. So I'm just going to take that clean water and just kind of let it bleed into the page a little bit. Now I actually went a little bit further than I wanted. I had a little bit more water on there than I actually needed. So if that happens, what you do is just pop your brush in there and you can soak some of that up. Now luckily we're in a spot where we can manipulate this a little bit and use it to our advantage. So I'm just going to pull out little tendrils with my brush over here. I'm going to keep this this edge soft up until maybe about here. Then I'm going to let it get hard. So you can see I'm really paying attention to what I'm doing to these edges now, right? I took a smaller brush. I was originally using a number 10 brush, and now I'm just going to use my number 6 brush. I'm just going to kind of soften this edge. Now you can see how the water really softens the edge of the paint, right? So I'm going to leave that area nice and crisp, and then I'm going to pull this area over here. I'm going to pull some of that out and let that little tendril come up over here. Just by taking my brush and actually pulling a little bit of pigment off, I can get that kind of lighter effect. Over here I'm going to keep this whole area soft. Now the other thing we can do is we can take paper towel and we can roll it up and really kind of help us kind of create some of those little tendrils that we're looking at the edges of the clouds. Clouds like to kind of curl up and peel away from each other, and they do it in a very graceful fashion, so we want to try to replicate that if we can. Alright, so over here, again, I'm keeping this edge soft, this edge soft. So remember, what watercolor artists usually try to do is where they want white, they try to leave the white of the paper. In some cases, we can come back and put an opaque white in, but it usually looks better if you just leave the white of the paper as your white. So I'm just looking at a one spot that I want to get another tendril in, so I'm going to kind of pull that out with my brush. Now let me just show you something else we can do as far as getting really nice little variations in the body of that blue sky. So I could just take a little piece of paper towel and roll it up, and I'm just going to kind of roll through and mimic some of those tendrils in the sky. So those little bits of sky that are just peeling off and kind of turning into a mist. Now once you do that, you can come back and just kind of soften the edges of it. Nothing too crazy. Just soften it up a little bit. We don't want the texture of the paper towel on there. Just to get a little variation in that field of blue. Again, what I'm doing is I'm kind of looking at my reference material and pulling a little bit of information off of that as far as what those clouds are doing. So again, I'm just throwing water in here, and that's really just kind of softening what I had already done. So you can see it works really nice. It works really well, and it's not a whole lot of work either. You get a really nice, believable effect, and we didn't do all that much work to get there. So that's where the wet into wet process really helps us. We have this really nice saturated paper, and because it's so wet, it's allowing the paint to blend freely and without a whole lot of work from us, which is nice. All right, so I'm just kind of playing with that a little bit. Now, I'm kind of liking what I got there. I'm not going to go nuts here. I'm going to maybe add a couple little tendrils over here. Now, again, this is up to you guys how far you want to take it. But you can see, you can have a lot of fun with this. It's not a whole lot of toil to get a decent result. And I'm just kind of following what my reference material is showing me. And these little bits of variation in the light and shadow, the lights and darks will make it, you know, if you get somewhere in the realm, it gives a little bit more believability to it. All right, so I'm liking that. So now I'm just going to come back in and I'm going to add a little more modeling within the sky. I don't want to overdo it though. Remember, I want to keep areas of light. I want to keep some real crisp white areas. So I'm going to keep this white, this white. I'm thinking about this ahead of time because I don't want to go back and have to pull it off after the fact. So I see over here, I definitely want to keep these areas white. We have phthalo blue here, and we also have ultramarine blue here, which is a little bit more violet version of a blue. And let's just, for the heck of it, see what that looks like in comparison to the phthalo blue. So this is ultramarine blue. You can see that violet in there. And sometimes clouds will have that within their, as they start to go into areas of shadow, it will have some ultramarine blue in there too. So, you know, again, it's nice to change color, and it depends on what you're trying to do. Again, if you want it to look really sunny and happy, you could stick with phthalo blue. Sometimes the violet clouds make it look a little stormy, but that could be nice as well. I'm going to keep these a little lighter in value than the actual reference material. So I think I'm going to use a combination of phthalo blue and my ultramarine and just see what it looks like. Let's just play with this a little bit. And remember that our watercolors are always going to dry a little lighter than we put them down anyway. That's something to keep in mind. All right, so what I'm doing here is I'm playing with the mixture. I want this to be very wet and very fluid, and I want it to be light in value. So that's going to pretty much do the trick for me. So I'm going to start over here. I have this nice kind of definitive shadow in the main thrust of my middle cloud here. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to put this in. And what I'm doing is I'm following the shadow pattern of the cloud itself. And I'm going to put this in, and I'm going to manage kind of small little chunks of this so it doesn't dry on me and get away from me. Because I want to soften the edges on the interior a little more and be able to manage it. So you can see that difference in the phthalo blue as opposed to the ultramarine blue, which is what I'm using now. My mixture right now is ultramarine blue and white. And it is nice to have that little color change, for sure. So now what I'm just making sure I'm taking clean water, and I'm just going to have this kind of bleed all the way up into this area here. And I'm going to come back over here on this side, since I have this edge going, and I'm going to try to keep this, keep working this edge. Some of these areas I could leave a little harder than others. Remember, if I want to soften the edges, just take clean water and just play with it a little bit more. Throw a little bit more shadow into this part over here. Okay, so down here, I'm just going to let this kind of blend out a little bit more. I got another kind of shape over here that I'm going to play with. And you can see my paper is starting to curl up on me because I'm using quite a wet mixture. And that's the reason why we tape it down, so it doesn't completely curl up on it. We can't actually do the painting. So from here on in, I'm just going to kind of let this blend out. I'm not going to do a whole lot with it. I'm just going to kind of let this be a real simple approach. Again, I'm just kind of loosely following the shadow patterns here. Up here it's breaking up a little bit more than I wanted it to. It's getting kind of a runny look to it, so I'm just going to kind of play with that just a touch. And see, it is nice to have the variation in color. Over here, I'm just going to kind of bring this up here. Again, what I'm doing is I'm following the shadow patterns that are already established in my reference material. I'm going to keep this thing overall fairly light. I just, again, we don't always have to go exactly to our reference material. We can use a looser interpretation to do what we want to do with it. So here I just wanted kind of a very soft cloud that has both soft and hard edges in it, and we're using two different blues, phthalo blue and ultramarine blue. Now it's okay to wash over that previous layer of phthalo blue with a little bit of ultramarine blue. Remember, watercolor is a transparent medium, so when you go over a previous color with another color, you're basically just tinting it. So what I'm going to do down here is I'm just going to kind of let this fade out. Again, I'm being mindful to leave certain areas of just pure white. Some are crisp and some are nice and soft. And again, that's a nice combination. So now I'm just going to kind of let this kind of wash out with some clean water. I'm going to just blend it out so I don't have any hard edges. And then I'll hit it with a hairdryer. And that's a quick little lesson on how we're going to do some nice white puffy clouds on a sunny day against a blue background. All right. And we're good to go.